Click it. All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Effin' Growth. What are we at? Episode 17 today. Going to talk all about growing your business. So we're going back to the roots of the show. Joe and I, our background is in sales. And so that's kind of the, why we started talking about this show is like, there's a lot of people talking about how to do all the things in Webflow. We want to talk about how to grow in Webflow. And so today we got a show dedicated all to that. So before we get too far into this, let's effing grow. Okay. What's up, Joe?
Hey, Raimar. How's it going? I'm ready for this one.
Great. Yeah, we got a crowd with us today. What's up, Sergey? What's up, Rock and Roll CEO? Yannick is in the house. Penny's here. Carrie Craver, Mike Elrod, Raphael, Penny, Maggie. Ooh, Babas is here. Yeah, we've got the whole squad today. And we've got a show for everyone. But you know how we usually do. We always start with a little disclaimer. And so today is no different. Oh, wait. Do we have any announcements, Joe? We have a couple announcements.
Let's go announcements. We have a few light ones.
Okay.
First one, head over to growth.finsweet.com. Start voting for your favorite topics. This show is all about user-generated topics. You vote on them. We talk about what has the highest votes. So go on over there, put your votes in, put your topics in. That is how we run this show. And we'll also ask that you subscribe to our channel and like this video. If you get any valuable information from this, please help us out with the like and the subscribe. It really helps us in our YouTube account. So we're asking that of you. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And the next one is from Raimar. This is a juicy announcement. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here, actually. So let me do this. Let's go to screenshot. And we teased this yesterday on Twitter. And we're just starting to plan. If you weren't around last year, we did an event called Clone Comp, which was a fantastic event over the course of 3 days, and it's ownable web design. And so it's all story driven. I'm not going to get into the details. You can check out clonecomp.webflow.io if you'd like to see that. There's a huge list of the winners there, the prizes we gave away. I think it was something like $8,000 in prizes here. There's videos about the event, overviews of what we did. It was a really cool event. I think we had something like 106 submissions from all over the world. This year we're expecting considerably more. And so the events, the date has been locked in. It's July 21st through 23rd. We're talking with sponsors and we're talking with the planning committee about the logistics and how we're going to figure all this out. But this event is going to for sure go down as the largest Webflow hackathon on the planet. And we expect a ton of activity around that. So this will be home base for how we announce updates. We'll keep you updated as we go. But you can also sign up for email updates on that sign, clonecomp.webflow.io. And I'm going to go ahead and share this URL. Go ahead, Joe.
Don't forget that there's a really awesome update from last year and this year. This year, we're hosting the event in the GatherTown Finsweet co-work space. So we're going to have a whole different level of interaction. Before we were on a Zoom call, it was great. But as we all know, this GatherTown experience is a whole different level. So this is going to be a really fun event.
And we have some cool stuff planned out because we're doing it inside of Gather of how the dynamic is going to work. We're going to make this feel super like an in-person hackathon. So we're going to have live build rooms. We're going to have spaces where you can interact with the participants, vendors, sponsors, etc. This is going to be like hands down one of the coolest events of the year in the world of Webflow. So go ahead and go over to clonecomp.webflow.io and drop an email there if you'd like to keep up with updates. Again, we'll also be here doing the same thing. And so with all that said, that's the end of the announcements. Let's get into this week's episode with a quick disclaimer. And real quick, Joe and I, our background, as we mentioned, is in sales. This is all about growing your Webflow business, but let's be real, like not everyone can be at the top, right? Like not everyone is going to be the premier Webflow agency, the biggest, the best, the baddest. And so like, don't feel bad wherever you are in this tier. And even the people who were at the top started at the bottom at some level. And so there's like just a process that has to take place here. And some of what we're going to talk about is the tenacious nature that you need to have to like really take the next step in your Webflow growth, and understanding that the competition is going to get pretty stiff, right? Webflow over the last couple of years has been just a new thing. It's a toy. And, you know, like us as the core users, you get to stand out a little bit because there's not that many people doing this. But as more and more people come into the space, it's going to become more and more commoditized, and it's going to become more incumbent on you in order to grow and drive sales to find ways to stand out. And so you'll see that everything we talk about today is going to be about finding ways to separate yourself from the competition, to kind of create a unique value proposition around what it is that you're doing so that you can really grow to that next level. Because building websites is really not that exciting in the grand scheme of things. From a technical complexity standpoint, we're all like web nuts. And so we love to do it. And this is our business, is our passion. But in the grand scheme of like business metrics and all of the things, like we kind of have to fight for attention. And that's what this show is about: learning how to grow, learning how to get the attention of clients, and how to take that to the next level. So, Joe, anything you want to add to that disclaimer?
No, that's a great disclaimer. Let's get into setting the baseline.
Boom.
And setting a baseline here is very, very important. And this is important not just for websites, but for anything that you are going to grow in. You have to have an honest understanding of yourself. You need to understand where you are in this process. You need to understand your skills and act on that. You cannot think that you're at a different level than you are at. And this is for everything, not just websites. If you want to be a better basketball player, if you want to be a better salesperson, if you want to be a better friend, you have to understand where you are before you get to the next level. So everybody needs to do this self-exploration and really, really look into themselves and understand where you are. And you need to have an honest comparison of everybody in the space. Don't compare yourself to Finsweet. We have a big team. We have a lot of talented people. We've been doing this for almost 6 years now. If you're in year 2 or 3, do not use us as a comparison. Try not to use any people as comparison. You are yourself. You have to understand your skills. And that is so important to understand before we get into what you can do to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100% with all of that. It's like not very many people, this is something we get on developers all the time about, right? Is having this big ego and thinking that development's the only way to do a thing. And then they dismiss no code. Don't be the no code or the Webflow version of that in your own life, where you think like your work is so good that you just don't see clearly where it actually sits in the spectrum of what is the world of web design or the world of Webflow design, right? And so the more realistic you can be about the type of work you're producing and kind of how that stacks up to everyone in the space, the better off you're going to be at understanding that baseline and then being able to grow above that, right? What gets measured mattered, or if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? And so having that baseline to understand like, okay, I'm actually growing or I'm not growing. So any other thoughts, Joe?
That's it for me.
Babis makes a good point here. Let me bring this up by Babis. Oh, nope, not this one. Is the other one. Some people need to understand that you don't have to be the best in a particular field to make a terrific living. That's a great point. You know, like there's so much work. I said in the intro a little bit about web design is going to be commoditized, but that doesn't mean that it's not, you know, a big industry. And there's so much work out there. People looking to get onto the web. So many new businesses that are sprouting up. Everyone needs to get into that experience where they can like build interfaces that people can interact with them in order to do business. That there's so much growth right inside of this space, and you don't need to be the top agency to make a great living. You know, like a lot of times people don't want the hassle of dealing with managing 10 employees or 50 employees, or, you know, maybe you want to be a freelancer or have a small 2 or 3 person shop. You can make a nice, comfortable living. You can have a flexible style of life. Babis, that's a great point, you know, and you can have a great living doing that.
Let's bring up Jennifer's comment here. I'd love to read Jennifer's comment. This is a great example. I have to constantly remind myself of this. Mom of four, web designer, but I work like 15 hours a week. I'm not a giant agency, and I'm totally okay that I love my business. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's okay. You can work any amount of time, any intensity, and the real key is that you're happy.
Yeah.
That's really what matters here. So before you grow, you got to be happy. That's a
Yeah.
requirement, no matter what you're doing here.
Yeah. And
Really
you
nice,
don't want
Jennifer.
to,
Thank you for sharing that.
it can grow out of hand, right? I think that a lot of time,
Yeah.
what we value in this space is that freedom, is the ability to control your own direction and to control your own trajectory. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jennifer, that, hey, if you want the flexibility and the freedom, there's very few industries that, you can make the kind of money you can in this space and have the level of flexibility, right? There's very few other career trajectories that give you that kind of option in life. So, okay, let's go to the next one, preparing for growth. And this,
Nice.
yeah, as a core step here, you should go check episode number 1 of this show, because what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about, a recap of what we talked about in that first episode, which is when to start thinking about growth, when to start worrying about like whether you need to hire somebody and kind of start delegating responsibilities, because that's like the first threshold to understanding growth. Once you have that baseline and once you've kind of set like, oh, this is where I am in my current trajectory, this is where I want to be, you have to start thinking about what are the steps you have to take to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And that's maybe delegating some of the work. Maybe that's freeing up more time so that you can go and dedicate to sales. Maybe that's, finding someone to do things that you don't necessarily want to do that are low value tasks that, again, is going to free up the time for you to go do this other stuff. And so these are the things you have to start thinking about. And Joe, so like take us back to episode 1 as we start thinking about growing and planning strategically for growth, bringing that first person in, delegating responsibilities. How do you start thinking about that? How do you approach that?
Start small. It's a very difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of practice and skill to start bringing the right people onto your team. What I recommend doing is starting with small tasks that don't have big deliverables or have really important clients attached to them. Have someone do some work for you, see if it works, pay them, and continue seeing if this relationship works. You have to start doing this if you're going to get to the next level beyond yourself. Some of you may be thinking growth internally, me as a person. This episode is more about growing the whole business, adding more people. And you have to add more people to grow because one person can't do everything. You can't have 30 active projects as one person. You can have 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 active projects. So start small. That is the best advice for getting that first person. Something not risky, and just do it. A lot of people are holding back on doing this. You got to just do it.
Yeah.
So that's really the very first step for me.
And that's something. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine this weekend. We were working on, I'm helping out with a video project they're working on, and he was talking about like his hiring stuff. And this was totally separate from the project we were working on. He says something about like hiring an assistant, and he was looking to pay somebody like $50 an hour for this work, and $50 is a great rate. If you can, like, he's not charging $50 for the work, so it's hard for him to pay that $50 for the work. And I was talking to him and saying like, and he was trying to provide them work for like more hours than he had project. And his feeling was, as a creative, is like, I need to provide for this person. I need to give them the opportunities that I didn't have as a creator and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this is not how you can approach. This is not like the right way to approach that initial work, because you'll go broke doing this. If you're going to like just set some arbitrary rate and just pay somebody randomly on some idealistic perspective of what you think they might be able to do for you, you're never going to like actually be able to delegate this successfully. Instead, what I told him, I was like, look, you need to figure out what percentage of what you bill you can actually split off to pay somebody, and then find somebody who's going to give you 80%, 90% of what you're looking to do for whatever that budget is, and then set that aside to pay them. And if you then, and try that with a couple different people, and when you find somebody who does good work, then you can reward them with a little bit more pay, or a little bit more work, or a little bit more of those perks or benefits that you think you'd like to bestow. but you don't get caught up thinking that you need real complex systems or that you have to hire somebody full time or provide somebody. Like, we're living in the gig economy right now. So when you start thinking about delegating work, again, not to be insensitive to people, not to take advantage of people, not to like, try to like rob people of their time. But, like there's people that are hungry out here looking to work, doing high quality work. Find somebody reasonable to do the high quality work that you need at whatever rate you can afford, and then try to move forward from that. Don't extend yourself too early, because you can start adding some real heavy fixed costs, and that can become a burden as you try to grow. So any thoughts on that, Joe?
Absolutely. Project by project. If you're paying someone to do work, ideally, the client is paying you more money than you are paying that person. The more you can do that as long as you can do that, do it. There was a point in Finsweet where 100% of the people that worked for us were directly tied to revenue. And this was it felt very safe, because as we were paying people, that money was coming right back from clients. Now we've moved to fixed costs because we got to the next level. But when you're starting, try not to do these fixed costs.
Yeah.
And I'd also like,
question.
Yes.
Robert is asking, what positions would you say you'd hire for first if you had to start again? Sales, client management, project management, etc.
For me, personally, I would have done exactly what I did. Looking for somebody that can do Webflow development and design. Why? Because I'm not a designer. So I need somebody to do a better job at design than I can. The answer may be different for you. Maybe you're not that good at sales, or maybe you're not that good at project management, or maybe you're not a Webflow developer. Then your first hire can be different. Everybody's first hire, it needs to be something else. And really, the question you have to ask yourself is, what do I need help with? If I could have somebody handle some work, what is that work? What do I not want to do anymore? What am I not good at?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you have to look at, Robert, to answer your question, you have to look at where the gaps are and what you're trying to do. If you're really strong at bringing in new clients, then you should be focused on bringing in new clients. You can find other people to maybe fulfill and do the work. The big thing is, when you delegate the work, is to not let go completely of these different tasks, right? You still have to manage, and we'll talk about over delivering, but you still have to manage the quality of work overall. And so just be careful that as you do that, you're not just kind of dismissing the quality of work to delegate it and to get it off your plate here. So any thoughts?
I'd like to bring up
preparing. I kind of cut you off the last time there.
Comment from Joel Mitchell before we move on to the next section here. It's important to think about the next 5 years. I'm super happy where I am now, but don't want to be a solo freelancer forever. This is a great point, Joel, that if you want someone to work on a project now, you can't bring them on now. You have to have vetted them. You have to have worked with them a little bit before you put them on a client project. We almost never bring someone into Finsweet and say, hey, here's your first client project. They have to prove themselves first. So 5 years is a big time frame, but if you're thinking about scaling later this year, you should probably start doing it now. And we're actually doing this at Finsweet. We are actively going through a growth, that we have new people that are trying out for our team. We have sessions to train these new people, because we are thinking that later this year, we're going to see an increase in projects, an increase in new clients. So we're training for it and preparing for it now. So good thinking, Joel.
Well, and that's one of those things about understanding your baseline. A lot of people are happy as a freelancer. Maybe you started as a freelancer and now you're thinking about, hey, I'd like to expand into that small agency role. Maybe you're a small agency and you're trying to figure out how to get a bigger agency. Maybe you're a big agency and you want to figure out how to get into the enterprise level. Like, there's always more levels, And so I think this comes down to like some personal goal setting and understanding, like, am I comfortable? Like Jennifer was talking about having the flexibility of a freelancer and only having to work 15 hours a week so that she can spend her time being a mom and being, having the flexibility to do whatever she wants. Or are you looking to get a little more aggressive and grow from a freelance operation into a small agency? And so I think you kind of have to assess, and then you have to think about, like, it's probably going to take 2 or 3 years to make the transition from, a freelancer to the place where you can float an agency, right? It's going to take at least a year or two to build enough work to where you can start covering all of your payroll costs. And that's kind of, that transition point. It's those couple years that, who knows how they're going to go, right? They always talk about that third year of business. Is like, once you get into that third year, once you make it through that third year of business, now you know that you've got something that might hang around for a little bit. But yeah, those first couple years can be interesting, especially if you don't have a clear trajectory for where you're trying to take things. That's why that setting that baseline is kind of really important, and having goals along the way, right? If you're talking about growth, if you're talking about, taking the next step, and you don't have some clearly defined goals ahead of you, it's going to be hard to hit that target. So any other thoughts there, Joe, before we move on?
That's it. Let's do it. Driving sales.
Driving sales. Oh, I hit the wrong
Nice.
button. There we go. Background. Okay. So real quick, this is 4 steps to kind of every sale here. And so we're going to walk through, and then Joe and I are just going to riff a little bit about sales. But essentially the process is capturing the client's attention, convincing them that you're capable of doing the work. Then you got to close the deal. And then from there, you've got to competently over deliver, right? As far as a premise. And so like, there's lots of sales systems. There's lots of like, use our sales trick to like do X, Y, and Z, or to grow more, blah, blah. And there's like a 10 steps to the sale, or 7 steps to the sale, or whatever. There's none of that. It's all bullshit, right? You got to grab somebody's attention. You got to convince them, right, that you can do the work. So that's usually your story. That's your blog. That's your marketing. That's your portfolio. That's all that stuff. Then you got to close the deal, right? So like lots of people get leads. Lots of those leads don't get closed, right? And so this has to do with your processes. This has to do with how you communicate with the client. This has to do with, how you negotiate and how you present. Joe talks a lot about the option close, which we can get into here in a little bit. And then you got to like do the work, right? The sale doesn't really start until the client is happy and starts telling other people, or until you have a portfolio of happy clients who are telling other people that you can then leverage to go out and grow, right? Because until then, you're not a known commodity. If it's just you out in the field and you're selling this, that, the other, and you got a website here, you're doing 5 websites a year, cool, no big deal, but nobody gives a fuck, right? You just don't have the track record for some of these larger companies to jump in and be like, oh, you're the person for me, unless these couple projects a year are like marquee, beautiful. Like there are some freelancers that only work on like a couple huge projects a year. But if you're getting started, that's probably not you. So over delivering, always building that reputation for delighting the customers. And that's kind of how you start compounding on that growth. So that's the core 4 steps of any sale. Joe, any thoughts? Let's just riff back and forth on driving sales and, really building that value and bringing new customers into the fold.
Sure. I'll jump back up to number 1, capturing the client's attention. What are you doing to capture attention? Do you have a beautiful website? Do you have a beautiful portfolio? Do you have a relatable portfolio? If the answer is no to all or most of those questions, you have a problem. With Finsweet, we take a very visual approach. You come to our site, it's wild. You see our portfolio, it's a lot. A lot of people have told us in the past, you should limit your portfolio items. You should only have your best portfolio items. I think that's bullshit. And the reason is people want to see a lot of examples. If you see 6 websites on someone's portfolio, your thought is, well, these are their only 6 websites. I have no other reference to what they've done. You go on Finsweet and you see 30, 40 websites. You see a few in your industry. You see a few that you love the style of. You see a few that may look just like your imagined website. And right away, within the homepage, we have captured that person's attention. Yeah. So you have to ask yourself, what are you doing to capture that attention? You have to have an answer to this.
Yeah. And I want to go even one step further as it relates to capturing attention, because presumably if you have them on your website, you've already captured somewhat of their attention, because typically you're doing the attention grabbing on some other platform through some other medium. You're on social, you're on YouTube. It's a referral. It's somebody saw something that caught their eye about your brand. And this is where Joe and I can't harp back enough on the intangibles that you can do to kind of build and grow your brand. We see a few people doing this really well in the Webflow community. You see Nelson started, and Nelson's not a freelancer full time, but working at the company, built a little community, offers a huge ton of value. I bet he stays, referring freelance work all the time. Mackenzie Child, always creating resources for the community, right? Always building projects, always doing cool things. You see Mason at Edgar Allan. Those guys are always offering value back. They run a meetup. They're doing, like, the people who really stand out and are capturing attention in the world of Webflow are not just building websites. Okay, again, the website is the commodity. That's like the vessel. That's the end product. What you need to focus on in order to grow is yourself, the way you present to your audience, and like, what are the things that you're doing to stand apart from all the other people who are also building websites, right? There's going to be a huge flood in this industry because of the community. Like, everybody is going remote, right? Because of the opportunity, because of how much money you can make doing this, because of the flexibility, because of all the things that we love about this industry, there's going to be a huge flood of talent here. And so for you to find interesting ways to stand out means that you have to step away from the website. Yeah, the website has to be beautiful and functional, and that has to work. But before you even get to that stage, you have to do so much to capture that attention. And again, that's really where you separate yourself, in my perspective. Joe, do you think, am I right? Am I wrong there?
You're completely right. Absolutely. You have to start capturing attention now, and I'd say it has to be aggressive because of what you just said. This is a growing industry. There's going to be more people coming in, and if they do it and they come in aggressive, you're going to be more difficult to find.
Can you answer
But
this
how do you do this when
Chase?
starting out?
Yeah.
Great question. And I see a really nice community answer by Jay. Jay says, create example sites for imaginary clients. And that's okay. Just don't lie about it. Go to somebody and say, hey, I am just starting out. I only have this one client site to show you, but look, I made 12 unique landing pages, and I think this one and this one are perfect for you. And tell them these are just practice sites, but it shows my quality. I built them myself, and it's a fair representation of my skills. We hire people at Finsweet from that. You don't have to be a monster working with clients and clients and clients. You just need work history. You don't need 2 things in your portfolio. You need 20.
Yeah. And I started landing Webflow clients fairly consistently just by creating clonable components. Right? They weren't even full websites. Like, I saw this little thing on the WeTransfer site, these little 3 cards that kind of fan out when you hover. And I was like, I wonder if I could build that in Webflow. And I built it. I released that. Next thing you know, it's got hundreds of clones on it. It's just a cool little thing visually that captured people's attention. And it took me maybe 30 minutes to build it, right? And so, like, you don't have to build full client websites. You don't have to rebuild the entire site. Like, one of the other things that I did early on was I rebuilt the Huffington Post and gave that away as a clonable, CMS driven, huge, just a template, right? And just made it clonable. And that allowed me to stand out. It allows people to then come in and see how I build, what am I capable of building, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be pretend clients. So going back to how do you do this when starting out, I think really finding interesting ways to showcase your work, right? So, like, find a nonprofit, find a cool nonprofit and rebuild their website for them. Find a cool product that you like that's just interesting and do something fun, interactive, playful. Joseph Barry is one that stands out. He built that Goonies website. I don't know if anybody remembers that Goonies website that Joseph Barry did maybe a year and a half ago or something like that. Joseph Barry was not really on the Webflow radar. I mean, he was, but not at the scope he was after that. Right? Because everyone loves the Goonies. Everyone went to this landing page and you see this really cool experience. And you're like, oh, this is insane. Who built this? And so, boom, Joseph Barry's on the map. And so you only need 1 or 2 of these things, right? So your goal as you're starting out should be constantly creating this type of content or these types of things and throwing them out there to the community to figure out how they stick. But it's not about volume, right? Don't just create another clonable. Create a clonable that when people see it, they're going to be like, whoa. And then don't just put it in the showcase. Create a GIF that showcases the clonable so that it stands out in the showcase. And write a nice description and just take a little bit of extra time to do a little bit more, which we're going to talk about as one of the steps here, and is always over delivering, raising the bar. So let's go to that next step right now, raising the bar, because like it's that finesse, it's that touch, it's that little bit of attention to detail in the nuance that really is going to help separate you from the competition, which again, we talked about is what matters here if you're trying to take that next step. So Joe, can you talk a little bit about raising the bar at Finsweet, how, we've gone about that, how you went about it in the early days? Like, what was the first thing? It was a CMS library. Like, what was it that you were doing that was really like when Finsweet took it to the next level?
Well, I think the very first thing that started taking us to the next level was our website. It was finsweet.com. It wasn't the version that you see now. It was the version before that. And the version before that, at the time, was one of the most crazy Webflow sites that you've ever seen. It was colorful. It had movement. It was crazy. We invested so much time and money into it. And that was the project that people started to talk about Finsweet. And at the time, it felt like a huge investment, right? We had no money. I was being paid pretty much nothing, below minimum wage. And I put all this money into building this new site. And within a few months, it paid itself back. People came and they loved it. Positive comments. People are talking about it. Webflow chatter. So that was the first thing. And now that's become kind of our thing. Our current site, also to the next level. We're working on the next site. It's going to be even the next level. So that's what you have to do. You have to really find a way to build something that is just the absolute best you can possibly do. What is going to show your skills at the very, very top level?
Yeah. And I also think like everybody wants the big $50,000 client, the $100,000 client, the, like that next level project. But to set yourself apart and raise the bar, you need to find that $5,000 client and give them the $20,000 website. You need to be known for like the clients just want to say like, holy shit, like we didn't have the budget to get this kind of site, but we got this. And we did that because we worked with Finsweet. And that's it. You have a loyal, that person's never going anywhere else. Like they got so much value that on the next and then on the next project, you can raise your prices, right? Like there have been instances in my career where I told somebody, look, I'm going to do this for you at X rate. The only thing is you can't tell anybody how much you paid for this. Like you literally, this is between you and I, what you paid. Okay. Because I'm going to go tell people that you paid considerably more for this, or I'm going to sell this at a higher value on the next time. And, again, there's just ways to really blow away the expectations. And so going back to Shais's question about like how to do this as you're beginning, just find unique ways to over deliver, to compound that, that to raise that bar in the quality of work you finish, the expectation, that emotion that you deliver that the client has. And a lot of people, okay, so like this also goes back to like the relationship you manage with the client, the way you manage that relationship, right? If there's tension in that relationship, no matter how good the end product is, it may not feel as seamless. And so like finding good ways to communicate and interact with the client is a great way to, again, raise the bar, because good relationships and good work compounds the work, right? Good work. Okay, that's good. That's good. We can deal with that. People will put up with an asshole a little bit for some good work. But if you have good work and also the experience is top notch, like bang, bang, that's that whole next level. What do you think here? Shais has got a follow up. What to think about outreaching? So he's probably talking about like cold outreach or just
cold outreach. Yeah.
Which I think is such
I'm going to recommend against it.
That's so hard to do in web.
It is. Even I would say, yeah, that's got to be a no. I've done the cold calling. It's had 0% success rate. It's not what people want. I mean, who wants to get a phone call and say, hey, I'm going to remake your website? It just doesn't happen.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't think that's something that you can do if you don't know about a site to practice on. Like, let's say you you don't know what to build. Maybe you can take a site that looks like crap, it's in WordPress, rebuild it in Webflow for practice, and email the company and say, hey, I remade this for you. Are you interested? If they are, maybe you have a new client. If they're not, change the logos, change the color, swap the content, and now you have this new example that you can go put on your portfolio. So that's something that I did all the time as a new person. I was building sites for companies without asking, and none of them actually accepted it, but they were work portfolio items that helped me get other projects. So just building and learning, you have to always be asking yourself, how am I going to raise the bar in everything I'm doing? My personal skills, my business, the way that I work with clients, how do we take this to the next level? If you're not thinking that, as Webflow grows, people are going to be thinking that, and they're going to walk all over you.
Yeah.
So you always need to be thinking to that next step.
There is always someone hungrier coming behind you, ready to put in that little bit extra work, right? So when you're like on V6 and you're like, this is, okay, this is good enough. Nah, because somebody's going to spend that little bit of extra energy, and, you want that person to be you. You literally, on a consistent basis, want that person to be you, not the person next to you. Right. And again, this isn't about competing with anybody but yourself. This is about holding yourself to higher expectations and holding your work to higher expectations. In order to do that, you need to have a competent understanding of what the marketplace is actually doing, where you stand inside of that, where that skill set falls, and then that's how you can grow and take the next steps into that. So, let's see. Let's go into moving fast.
Let's go to moving fast. And let's bring up some comments here.
Actually.
I see Eunice has a good comment, why we don't link to customer websites. I'd like to answer that.
Sure.
So we do not link to customer websites for a very specific reason. And that reason is most of our websites are client owned. What that means is we build the site, hand it off to the client, and it's in their hands. So we have had instances where we link out to the site and we're talking to a lead and they're like, well, this isn't mobile friendly. This isn't this is a mistake. And we say, well, it wasn't a mistake when we delivered it, but once the client didn't follow our rules and edited things, now it's broken. So we don't link out. The screenshot is exactly how it was delivered. We built that to spec. Some of the sites are perfect. Some of them are broken. And we just had a default rule, do not link out to the sites. I wouldn't recommend this as a new company. I think with the amount of websites that we have here, it's okay. But if you just have 2 or 3 sites, people are going to want to check those out.
Yeah.
I would definitely add those links in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, and one more thing that you can do. If you think that a client's going to ruin the site, keep a duplicate that you can just turn on and off manually when you need to show it and say, hey, this is the live site, but the client kind of messed it up. Here's the original version that I made. This is the work that you should be basing it on.
You probably always want to do that, by the way. I always, when I transfer a project to a client, I always duplicate it, right? So I duplicate that. I send them the original. I keep it. You never know what they're going to do, right? You never know when they're going to delete the project by accident or break something internally, and then you don't have a copy of it. Oh, just don't do that. Just don't do that. Mm-hmm. It's so easy in Webflow to just duplicate a project and have a second version of it, send it out for them. And like Joe said, if you need for posterity later on to show somebody, you could have some private links on your end that are just published to some no-name, .webflow.io URL. That's just, you can share them privately with people and say, hey, these are things that I built. I don't put them up front because of X, Y, or Z, but here they are for you to look at. And so let's wrap up here, because moving fast, I think, and always over delivering, we kind of talked about, but the moving fast, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, because going back to that complex structure we talked about when we're talking about understanding how to grow and how to prepare, you don't need the same systems if it's just you and one other person or a small team like you just don't need the same structure as a 50-person agency or a 20-person agency or even a 10-person agency, you know? And so like I see a lot of people trying to emulate best practices of like big corporate enterprises. And it's like, that's not for you, right? Like that's not, as a small business, that's not the way you need to be thinking about this, because you're not going to be nimble enough. You don't have the infrastructure, right? You don't have a dedicated HR person. You don't have in-house counsel. You don't have like an operations manager and a marketing officer and a whole communications team. And like, so you can't do these things, right? The same way you can't compare yourself to these companies, you can't compare your expectations or expect that your processes are going to line up to that. What you need to do is figure out what works for you and build your own processes around that. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at best practices or that you can't be reading books about productivity and seeing how other people work so that you can optimize your workflow or like figuring out how to do, you know, other things. But at the end of the day, you need to understand, what is my goal? How am I operating? And how is this relationship being managed between my clients? And if that's a successful relationship, and at the end of the day, you're delivering high quality work and the customers are happy, fit the processes into that. Don't drive yourself nuts, especially early on, right? Getting locked up in these processes, because again, if you have 1 or 2 projects at a time, like you just don't need this stuff. And so you should be experimenting as often as possible. You should really be exploring different things, different ways to build, different ways to interact with the team, different productivity tools, etc. Like this is the time to be experimenting and playing and building things and like just exploring. And then as you scale, as you grow, you take the best of that and you instantiate those as like the procedures and the policies and the systems and the whatever, you know? And then you hire somebody to like come and implement that while you keep growing and doing the thing that made you successful up until that point. So any other thoughts about moving fast there, Joe?
Yeah, everything you said is something. These are things that we are so passionate about at Finsweet. We try to not look at any other companies and what they're doing. I don't like to read for this reason. I don't want anybody's ideas. I don't want to know how you run your business. I'm concerned about how Finsweet is running the business. That's what the focus on. You can read a book about a organized organization with great and happy people, but that is that person's experience. We're in a different industry. We have a very different type of business, a very unique opportunity for remote work. So these traditional things, these things that you've heard for so long, don't fall into these traps. I like to think of them as traps, that we always have this thing in companies, so we're going to do it. Be creative, make it up yourself for your industry and your business. So yeah, and when you do that, you get to move fast. That's the big benefit of this, that you're not tied down with all these rules. You just get to work.
And it's all changing so fast. This last year has redefined everything. Like there's so many people that are talking about looking for a new place to live because now they're remote and they want to go explore a new city, or are thinking about leaving their work because they want to go somewhere remote and another company understands this. And so like over the next year or two, there is going to be such a realignment of how people work. Next episode, we're going to talk all about this. So next week's episode, we're talking all about remote work, how to create a great remote work environment. And I think that'll be an interesting conversation to talk, because like I've learned so much coming into the workplace here at Finsweet. It's completely asynchronous, right? It's just different than anything I've ever done before. And that was uncomfortable for me to get used to, because I expected things to be like they were in other companies that I'd worked at before. And I expected, you know, just stuff that now seems silly, right? Like now that I'm like, oh, I'm glad we don't do that stuff. I hear my friends talking about their meetings, and even my girlfriend, who works in a remote environment, kind of has hours that she has to be tied to the desk. And so I'm really interested next week to talk about the evolution of, you know, that working space, because it's creating it's changing everything. And so if you're building a business thinking about trying to duplicate something that was successful in the last decade, you're probably doing the wrong thing, because everything is just changing. All of the rules for how society works, how we organize, how we communicate, how we do and deliver work, like that's all changing. And so you really should, again, be moving fast and experimenting and exploring with new ways to build and grow, without breaking everything, right? I'm not a big fan of the, move fast and break things, but I am a fan of move fast and experiment and, double down on things that work. But you can't forget about always delivering high quality work. So we're going to end with a reminder that at the end of the day, the work should speak for itself, right? At the end of the day, your portfolio should do most of your talking for you. Your content, the stuff you're doing in the community, the presence, the ambiance of your brand, that's all one thing, right? But the work itself is really what people are buying. Or the idea that if I hire you, I'm going to get the same experience that I had when I experienced your website, right? When I come to this brand, I have an emotional connection. I want that, right? And so that's kind of what you're selling. You're not selling web design. You're not selling no code. You're not selling Webflow. You're selling a potential client reaching their goals, right? You're selling a client on their ambition of capturing their audience, right? They have this attachment too. They want that experience for their audience when they come to their website. This is what you should be looking to deliver. And again, comes down to those details, the nuance. And, I just can't overhype how important it is to just always try to exceed those expectations.
Nice. Yeah. Over deliver. It's everywhere. You can over deliver in every single thing that you do. And it's powerful. And when I think of over delivering, the very first thing I'm thinking of is over delivering to clients, what we talked about before. Having that $1,000 website and delivering it as a 5,000. Keep it in your head that it's a 5,000. Think it's a 10,000. And that's how you have a bunch of $10,000 portfolio items in a few months.
Yeah.
So, yeah, always over deliver. It's a great motto to live by when you're building websites.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. We'll jump right into the QA today. I wanted to point out, Babis made an interesting point again earlier too. He said something about my first 2 Webflow clients were exactly like this. They had very outdated WordPress sites. I made a landing page with a redesign, blah, blah, blah. And so it's going back to like kind of rebuilding and presenting that. And then his follow-up comment was, now I get at least 2 requests a week for references from these clients. Word spreads. If your work speaks out for itself, you can start with 1 to 2 projects and grow from there. And so,
nice, Babis.
Yeah, Babis, that's exactly it, right? It's like you got to compound and, build on your growth, right? It's hard to build a skyscraper, to build the 12th story if you don't have the 11th below it, and then 10 below that, and all the other ones below that. And so like, you can't just build the 12th floor or the 50th story on a high rise. Like you just can't do it. You could, but it's gonna be the first floor. It might be identical, but it's not gonna be on the 50th floor, right? And so you have to start with that foundation, and then all the other floors have to be there before you could build that next, that high rise. Let's see, Sergey here. To build something new, sometimes you have to break something old. Yeah, wisdom from Sergey right there. If you guys missed it, the last 2 episodes of Critique, those critique shows have been a lot of fun. So each Thursday, and actually this week we've got Nelson Abalos and Joseph Berry. We mentioned Joseph Berry earlier in the show today. He's going to be one of the guest judges. So it'll be Joe, myself, Nelson, and Joseph Berry, which would be a lot of fun, by the way.
I'd like to offer a word change to Sergey's comment here.
Yeah.
To break something new, I don't like the word break. A lot of the times in Webflow, we're not breaking anything. We're instead just understanding its limitations and building on top of it. So I like to think in order to build something new, sometimes you have to understand something old. If you understand what you're doing, that's how you build something new on top of it. We understand Webflow. We understand these limitations. We're not breaking anything. This is part of the program. It's a feature. So we understand it, and that's how we build something new.
Yeah.
So another way to look at that.
This brings me, there's something called Chesterton's fence. And Chesterton's fence is like an analogy that talks about like kind of the 2 core archetypes of humanity. And these core archetypes kind of break down into how we end up on two different sides of any kind of political spectrum or spectrum in general, right? And so Chesterton's fence is this premise that imagine you're walking through a jungle. There's two people walking through a jungle, and it's a really dense, thick jungle, and you stumble into a wall, and it's like a 50-foot, let's just imagine it's a 50-foot wall, and it goes from horizon to horizon as far as you can see. And one person might say, this is stupid. Why is there a fence in the middle of the jungle? Let's tear this down. And the other person might say, hey, let's figure out why the hell somebody built a 50-foot fence in the middle of the jungle before we tear it down. And so, yes, in our industry, it's always about try something new and break the old and move around and do whatever. But like we understand in UX and UI, there's certain reasons why things work and why designs are a certain way. And so when you're in this space, you have to understand kind of both parts of that archetypal personality. You need to understand why there might be value in tearing down the fence, and you need to understand why there might be value in like preserving parts of the fence or why that fence exists. And, you know, a lot of these things translate into the digital world really well, and being able to see both of those perspectives allows you to kind of grow and push and advance the type of work you can do. So a little philosophy there for for Sergey there.
Nice.
But
love it.
Yeah.
Love it. We have some great questions here.
Wes.
Yeah, from Wes.
Wes Merrill is asking,
what are your thoughts on the unlimited design agency model? Unlimited design agency. So, Wes, I want to say that I saw your post in the Facebook group. I think I saw one of these recently. This is dangerous. I mean, unlimited means unlimited. If we were to hire you for unlimited, we'd work your ass off. You know, and a lot of clients are going to have that mentality. I'm not saying that we would have that mentality, but that's what it means. You know, somebody can hire you as a full-time 40-hour-a-week designer. So it's nice in theory, but be careful about being overworked. Maybe have some type of hour system or credit system or like pay-as-you-go type system. This seems a lot more reliable for growth. You don't want to get to a point where you have all the work you can handle and you're like, I can't take on any more clients. You always want to be able to scale that. And I think it's more difficult with unlimited.
Yeah, and there are brands doing this, like those design pickle kind of things, or like there's these big companies that do stuff like that, where it's like you pay one monthly fee and you get, you know, a bunch of the biggest thing for me is like, this is the race to the bottom. You know, this is how these skills get commoditized, and you know, that's a race that you don't want to try to win because you're racing to the bottom there. If you do the unlimited design model, in my mind, you should be charging a lot of money. Like a lot of money. Yeah. So there are some companies that do like what they call continuous improvement or like continuous iteration, right? And so it's like, it's not a fixed scope project. There's just kind of like, we're going to do X amount of work for you on an ongoing basis. And there's kind of like, you can change scope throughout. That doesn't mean that you just have unlimited amount of hours. It just means that the scope is flexible and you can allow the company to kind of change directions as they go, but knowing that there's still some kind of hours capped or there's some like time-based restriction or something there, because you could really find yourself in a world of hurt on that kind of model. Let's see. How do you? Let's see who else is coming in. Susan is saying, I've been getting a lot of quality leads by my news plus insights section. I think it qualifies my company to take on X client projects. And somebody said something earlier too about like copy content. I don't know if it was Susan or if it was somebody else was talking about like blogging and creating content as a good way to get new leads, grow, for sure. Yeah, anything you can do to set yourself apart. Long form content is great for SEO. These live streams have been, you know, great for just exposure. There's a great, you know, like there's no shortage of people looking for interesting content online, which means there's no shortage of content online. But yeah, creating great content in any format is a good way to get people kind of interacting with your brand here.
Let's jump on a comment from Joel asking about BEM and Finsweet.
Sure.
We'll just do a quick client first mention here. So Joel asks, does Finsweet use BEM? And the answer is no, we do not. We do not believe that BEM is the best method for Webflow as a platform. And instead, we've created our own CSS naming convention. We've announced this a few times. We've had a couple of rounds of testers. There are people in the public, in the wild, testing our new system. And probably in a month or so, we're going to release a lot of clonables, a lot of resources, a lot of examples, and the official release of this new naming convention. So no BEM. We're doing our own thing at Finsweet.
Yep. Let's see. This is a good. This is a good question. Vinu Jangra is asking, my partner normally overcharges clients. I mean, I feel he overcharges, and whenever I say so, he says there's nothing called overcharging. So I would ask you this question, Vinu, is if he's overcharging, how has he continued to get more work? Right? Typically, if you're overcharging people, this is what the concept of a market is if you overcharge people, it's typically hard to find clients, right? And so if people are paying these prices, maybe you're undercharging. And so a lot of people have an apprehension to setting certain prices or to increasing prices or to charging what may be a fair rate for their project compared to what you might be used to. And so I would say maybe you need to start thinking about there's more value in your projects. This doesn't mean he may not be overcharging, right? I don't want to dismiss it or make some generalization, but any thoughts about charging, overcharging, Joe?
Yeah, it depends how people are reacting. If you keep overcharging as you think and people keep saying no, that may be a sign that you are overcharging. If you think you're overcharging and people say yes, then you are not overcharging, and maybe you're even undercharging. So it really depends on that person's reaction. Something costs, a product or a service costs what somebody is willing to pay for it. That's it. There's no official cost for anything. Whatever someone's willing to pay, that's the value. So you have to play with this. You have to understand this as yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see, Grace. I always state the scope in our contracts, but it's in reality, it's always flexible. If it's not a huge time add for me, but makes a big difference for my client, I'll include it. Sure. I think that's the right strategy, Grace.
Yeah.
I mean, always deferring to trying to be comfortable with the client is going to win you points because that goes back to that relationship about doing good work and also managing a good customer experience. But also creatives have a tendency to let clients kind of walk all over them or to ask for more. And a lot of times, you know, creatives come from a position of empathy and a position of like really trying to please. And this can be difficult to say no to a client who just wants to add more and add more. And so I agree, having clearly defined scope. We, however, have a policy about like making sure the client's always happy. So we will always kind of defer to figuring out what that means. But that also doesn't mean we just let people add work, you know? And so, yeah, outlining and we talk a little bit about that. I don't remember which episode it was, but if you look through the past episodes, we've got an episode all about like outlining the scope and asking the right questions to lock in the deal here.
And Grace, this is really great. It's definitely important to be flexible. And when somebody does walk all over you and they start to take advantage of you, this is what we respond to. This is how we respond to that. We'll say something like, we can do this, but this, what you just asked for, is about 12 hours of work. And this is not something that we planned. This is not something that was in the schedule. I don't have time to do it this week. And you can, if it's towards the end of the project, you can say, we can save this for post-launch, or we can talk about this as a separate project. Yep. Go ahead and explain what they're asking for. And that goes for the easy stuff too. Hey, I need this. Great. I can do this, this, and this, and it'll be done in an hour. Great. If it's 12 hours, tell them, let them know that it's a big ask, because some clients honestly do not know. They'll say, add this to the site. And from the bottom of their heart, they have no idea if that takes 5 minutes or 5 days.
Yeah. Yep. Great points there. Wyatt is asking, how much content do you think I should start with as a small agency to start a resources blog? Should I specialize those resources in Webflow, present to, present to a general web design audience, or both? Wyatt, you could do it with one resource, man. Literally one high quality resource that delivers value is going to do way better than 10 pieces of content that nobody cares about. And so,
yeah.
And it's good to start with one that really bangs, and then you set an expectation for the next one. And so again, you compound on that and compound on that. That's kind of what the plan should be for that. I don't think there's a specific number. It's more about the value that this offers and how do you go forward in that. Okay, one more question, Joe. Should we jump into the co-work space? If anybody wants further discussion here, what should we do? We're right at 1 o'clock, so I think we're at the wrap point here.
Yeah,
let's
go to the co-work space.
Yep.
Final comments here. Please go to growth.finsweet.com, vote on the next episode. If you found something valuable in this stream, go ahead, give us a thumbs up, and check us out for a critique on Thursday. Yeah. Let's keep these live shows going strong. As people continue to come and we have great community, we're going to do more and more live shows.
Yeah, okay. I'm grabbing the co-work link right now. Going to post that in the chat. We're going to wind down the stream here. We will see you all in the co-work space. If you want to hang out with us, finish up those last couple questions. We always spend about 15, 20 minutes interacting after the show. So, yeah, see y'all over there. Catch you next week. Critique, once again, this Thursday, Nelson Abalos, Joseph Berry. It's going to be an amazing episode. Lots of great websites we're going to review. We'll see you Thursday. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week on another episode of Effin' Growth.